This one's wife, exposed for the fraud she is. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Many of the critics of this one's wife regard her as a fraud. There are multiple instances of where her behaviour, her recollections, her anecdotes don't measure up to the actual reality as seen by everybody else. One matter that often frustrates individuals is the apparent failure of mainstream media to expose her as a charlatan. It would appear, however, that there is some traction that is starting to be generated with regard to the exposure of how she acts in a particular way, which shows that she could well be described as a fraud. A lengthy article has appeared in the Daily Mail, which, as you know, is far from a fan of this one's wife. And in this article, it exposes a host of contradictions and evidently staged behaviours that this one's wife has engaged in. The article goes into considerable detail and covers the following instances. The recent appearance of the ever-so-clean vegetables in the basket and different types of vegetables in terms of their harvesting times all being available at the same time. This one's wife trying to give the impression that she has grown these in her garden and harvested them from her garden, even though they are harvested at different times and there's not a speck of dirt upon any of them. I pointed this out in a previous video, as did many other individuals. It also references, at the beginning of the year, when she started posting on Instagram, the fact that she had already written 2025 in the sand, which was seen in the video, demonstrating that there must have been multiple takes before she published the video that she was satisfied with. The article also highlights the Easter Ducklings episode, whereby this one's wife portrayed it as happenstance, that she just happened to be emerging from the foliage and came across a mother duck and her ducklings, whereas the circumstances of that being happenstance are pretty slim indeed, and more likely it was set up so that she was available to be on hand to be pictured and filmed whilst it was taking place. The Mail also identifies the discrepancies in respect of the green St. Patrick's Day waffles, whereby the finished waffles had a different pattern from her waffle maker, suggesting that they had been shop purchased and not created by her. The first date outfit also gets a mention. Harry, in Spare, explains that when he went on the first date with this one's wife, she was wearing a black sweater, jeans, and heels. This one's wife, in a 2018 interview, said that she was wearing a blue dress on their first date. This one's wife has recently spoken about the difficulties of juggling working and being a mum, finding it incredibly overwhelming, and then goes on in a separate interview to confirm that she's had a nanny for the last 5 years. Once again on Instagram, she posted a picture with the caption "Daily Rituals," which showed her walking on the stone edging of her garden barefoot, suggesting that on a daily basis she goes out into the garden barefoot, like some carefree pixie collecting spring onions, which once again looks suspiciously fresh. And yet, on Instagram again, she posts a picture of her wearing Wellington boots. So she isn't daily going about her business in the garden barefoot. And finally, it identifies the fact that she claimed to be a beekeeper in a recent Instagram video, but it's been commented that her outfit is suspiciously clean, it's not smeared with pollen, dirty from the brown of the pollen, and the way that she handles things demonstrates that she's not an accomplished beekeeper. 8 discrepancies that expose her as a fraud. You won't be surprised to learn of this. There'll be plenty of other instances that you know about where she has contradicted herself, been a hypocrite, has portrayed herself in a particular way which doesn't fit with the reality. And yet, no sooner had this article been published than up pops an article in The Independent which states, "Give this one's wife a break. It's little cheats that make the social whirl go round." The article explains when the Duchess of Sussex shared a picture on social media of all the wholesome vegetables that had been freshly plucked from the gardens of her Montecchio mansion in California, not all of her followers were entirely convinced. Many pointed out that the contents of this one's wife's basket had a surprising lack of mud on them, and others that some of the vegetables in her garden haul weren't yet in season. This begged the question as to whether the Duchess of Sussex, who posted it on the Instagram page of her As Ever lifestyle brand, really grew them herself. One follower wrote, "She's so good at gardening, she can grow all things from all seasons at once." Another said, "I've never seen vegetables so clean after harvesting." But hang on, even if she has cheated a little for the social media camera and popped off to the local farmer's market instead of pulling produce straight from her own soil, she'd not be the first to do it. Who among us, writes the journalist, myself included, hasn't hoodwinked our friends into thinking we're great gardeners, cooks, or party hosts in this way? Little white lies are what make the social whirl go round. The journalist then explains a circumstance where she has engaged in such activity whereby prior to a dinner party, she bought a ton of award-winning ready meals from an upmarket grocery shop in Notting Hill and took all the credit for it, including the luxury mashed potato I simply squeezed out of the packet. And she talks about how for celebrities and influencers, a picture-perfect ideal is the norm on social media. I also rarely document the bad moments, the kids' meltdowns and grubby clothes covered in food. Instead, everything looks picture-perfect, like the Duchess's vegetables. Now, it is, of course, the case that many people place on social media an image of their life which isn't accurate. And if you are somebody that engages critical thinking, you'll recognise that. For instance, you'll know that the picture is posed. You will know that it's been arranged in a particular way to make it look attractive. You'll have seen instances whereby the person in the picture may have used a filter. They may have taken the picture from above because that generally makes you look slimmer, and so forth. And it is, to an extent, a misrepresentation. However, what this article fails to understand is the driver behind these behaviours. And also the impact. It's one thing for your friend to make it seem like they are in a posh restaurant by taking a snap of themselves, sat there with a drink, but they don't actually eat there. At the end of the day, who does that impact upon? A small number of people who might see the post, an even smaller number who might be interested in it, and ultimately, nobody's that bothered about whether they ate there or not. It is not of a material consequence. Why did they do it? Well, it might simply be that they wanted a bit of attention. It might be that they're feeling a bit low and they want people to respond and say, "Oh, looks lovely, enjoy yourself." And also bear in mind, because of the herd mentality of human beings, this whole disease of portraying yourself in a particular way on social media sucks other people in, so they start to engage in similar behaviours in a battle for attention. It's narcissistic behaviour, undoubtedly, because it's showmanship and vanity, both of which are narcissistic traits, but it doesn't equate to them actually being narcissists. As you know, we'd need to look at more than that. For this one's wife, you know that the driver behind these fraudulent behaviours isn't a simple need for attention, it's much deeper than that. She contradicts herself because, as I've explained to you on many occasions, her narcissism operates in the moment. Accordingly, she will tell Harry when he's writing spare, "Oh, put in the fact that I was wearing a black sweater, jeans and heels. Or that is the accurate recollection from Harry. But when she has an interview, she wants to assert control in that moment and draw fuel. So her narcissism says, yes, when I had my wedding dress, I had part of the dress that I wore on the first date, because it was blue, sewn into my wedding dress as part of something borrowed, something blue, etc. That didn't happen. But this one's wife's narcissism invents that through a revision of history in that particular moment to assert control for the purposes of gaining fuel also. When her narcissism does that, it is not thinking about what actually went on, namely, she wore a black sweater, jeans and heels. It isn't thinking about the fact that at some point that might be referenced in a book. All it cares about is asserting control, managing the facade, and drawing fuel in that instance. And if that means causing her to say, oh, yes, I had sewn into my wedding dress a piece of blue fabric from the dress that we wore on our first date, even though that's a lie, that's what happens. Similarly, when she's talking to Jamie Three Names, she has to talk about how I'm juggling working and being a mum. It's incredibly overwhelming. Pity play. In another interview, she wants to boast about the fact that she has a nanny, because boasting provokes, and it means people provide her with fuel. Accordingly, she talks about, I've had a nanny for 5 years. Naturally, she doesn't work out, hang on a minute, that means that when I talk about juggling working and being a mum, that doesn't really happen, does it? Because I'm a nanny. But her narcissism doesn't join the dots in that way. It simply doesn't care. A more evolved narcissist would keep the story straight. Her, as a middle mid-ranger, does not. Similarly, look at me, I'm a beekeeper. I'm practiced and able at this. She doesn't think, wait a second, my overalls are hardly dirty because actually I don't do any beekeeping, somebody else does that for me. All her narcissism cares about is, look like you're beekeeping, people will react to that, that'll enable you to assert control and draw fuel. And there are numerous examples of this one's wife doing this. You know that the driver behind this isn't simple attention seeking or wanting to make your life look more exciting than it actually is, which is usually the case when people engage in this behavior on social media. What drives her behavior is a pathologically entrenched system of behavior that is a self-defense mechanism that is part of her DNA, whereby she is moved to pursue the need for control, fuel, character traits and residual benefits on a moment-by-moment basis, and her narcissism makes her lie, makes her engage in this fraudulent behavior, causes her to revise history again and again and again. It does so because it enables her to get the prime aims. It does so because she's entitled. It does so because she has no conscience or sense of accountability. Accordingly, there's a world of difference between why she does it and Stacey from Accounts puts a couple of posts on her social media which aren't quite accurate. This one's wife does it for the sake of the pursuit of the prime aims. Stacey does it because her life's a bit boring and she wants to make it look a bit more exciting, so she gets a few likes. Thus, these articles, of course, the male highlighting the fraudulent discrepancies, the independent excusing it, both fail to address what actually is behind this one's wife's behaviours. But there's another aspect to this also. All Stacey from Accounts, with her embellished posting, is perhaps conning her few mates who see it, and as I mentioned before, the even smaller number who actually care about it. But this one's wife has, if her Instagram is to be believed, millions of followers. Now, it's doubtful whether she actually has that many, but she still has considerable exposure. And with that comes a responsibility. But naturally, she doesn't exercise that responsibility. She talks about wanting to protect children, etc., online. Well, one way of protecting them would be to ensure that they develop critical thinking, that they don't engage in the telling of lies, that they don't misrepresent situations, that they don't get sucked into the need to live their lives through social media. And yet, what does this one's wife do? lives a significant aspect of her life through social media, as I predicted, tells lies and revises history. Once again, she's demonstrating that she's a hypocrite. Furthermore, unfortunately, she is a role model for some, and engaging in this embellishing behaviour legitimizes it. It's fair to say she's not the only individual that does this, and therefore one isn't simply saying it's this one's wife who's at fault for this kind of behaviour. Far from it. There are plenty of narcissists on social media that engage in this behaviour, but she is a particularly prominent one. And given that she holds herself out as a bastion of common sense and decency and goodness, she ought, but we know she won't, engage in alternative behaviour. It's also the case that she's creating an image in relation to a brand which purportedly is selling products. And then it realms into an even murkier area. Although there isn't actually anything for sale from as ever, if she's representing to potential consumers that what you're purchasing from her was grown in her garden and made by her, when the actuality is that she's flying in frozen fruit from elsewhere and it's being mass-produced, then that's clearly misleading and a misrepresentation. And undoubtedly, in most jurisdictions, there would be laws that would counter that. Accordingly, her behaviour not only is morally reprehensible, but also legally questionable. And therefore, it's not just a case of making it seem like you're having a jolly time in a restaurant, but it's actually having consequential impacts whereby it could be inducing people to purchase products under a misrepresentation. The Mail highlights the repeated behaviours on 8 instances whereby what actually has gone on is not that which is portrayed by this one's wife. It's hardly news to all of you, but what is interesting is the fact that they've been moved to expose this fraudulent behaviour, and as I've pointed out, you understand that it's not simple embellishment and attention seeking like Stacey from Accounts. It's not something that you can dismiss in the way that the writer from The Independent has done, but it is a wholesale pathological behaviour with serious consequences. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.